Welcome to Medicare GPS, navigating you step by step through your Medicare journey. I'm Jamon White. This is my wife, Paula White, and we are founders of Four Oaks Medicare Planning. So, Paula, what do we have on tap today?
Yes, so today's a very interesting and relevant topic. We're going to be going over what happens when you're turning 65, but you're still working.
Boom, boom, boom.
I know. We get this question so many times because people are like, well, I don't have to do anything, right? And then they hear,
or I'm going to get penalized.
Penalties. Yep. And so they get really scared about that. So we're going to go over kind of what those pitfalls are. What are those penalties? How do you avoid big, giant bills? And then we're going to go over our stories. Usually we always have a good story time, some inspiration about what's going on. And then always follow up with news and deadlines at the end.
Okay, well, let's get started.
So one really common question we get a lot is, I'm still working, but yet I'm turning 65. So I'm getting all these things in the mail. They're telling me I need to do something.
What do I need
to do? Because I'm still on my employer plan and it's still working for me, I think. But maybe Medicare's better. I don't know. What am I supposed to do with that? And more people in the baby boomer generation are working past 65.
And for whatever reason, the answer is always, it depends.
It depends.
It can be not a big deal, or it can be a big deal. So it's really important to talk to somebody about what you need to do and have them go over some of the criteria that matters.
Yeah, so let's get on into that. So kind of go through what our basics of A and B and when they're supposed to sign up for that typically, and then when it makes sense to sign up for A and B if you're still working.
Yeah, so A and B, remember, is original Medicare. That's what you get from the government, actually through Social Security is where the enrollments happen. So typically, when you're getting inundated in the mail, that's usually because you're coming up on your 65th birthday. So there's what's called a 7-month initial enrollment period. Mm-hmm. And that window starts 3 months before your birthday month, includes your birthday month, and 3 months after. There's one caveat: if you're born the first of the month, it actually starts a month earlier. So, but it's a 7-month window, and so that's what you need to work within to make sure that if you need to go on to Medicare, that's when you do it. Mm-hmm. If you don't need to go on Medicare, just make sure that you actually can delay it and not be penalized in the future.
How's that different than someone that is working and going to continue to work for a couple years or a couple months after that window?
Yeah, so the key is if you have other qualified coverage. So if someone is retired already or not working or doesn't have an employer plan, typically you would sign up within that 7-month window because Medicare is going to act as your primary insurance when you turn 65.
Right.
But if you're still working and you still have a group employer plan, that's when we have to figure out, well, what's the size of your company? We have to figure those things out first because the answer always depends upon several factors.
Okay, so let's go into that. Let's dive into that a little bit. So how does the size of the company matter, and what are some of those other factors?
Yeah, so it's really important to know the size of your company because that is what decides whether your Medicare is going to be primary or secondary if you sign up for it. So if you have a large group employer plan, and per Medicare rules, that's 20 or more employees. So if you're 20 or more employees, then Medicare is designed to be secondary to your large group employer plan. Now, if you're less than 20 employees, then Medicare is designed to be primary to any small group employer plan. So that's why you can delay Medicare generally if you are with a large group employer plan. You're an active employee and you continue to be covered on that coverage. Now, if you're with a small group employer plan, Medicare recommends you need to sign up for Medicare A and B because it's designed to be primary and you don't want to have a gap in your insurance when the time comes for your insurance to pay the bills. It does matter if it's not primary, they might be looking to another company or Medicare to pay first.
Okay, so let's unpack that a little bit. So kind of describe, someone calls and they're in a large group, and I put that in quotes because, typical large groups are not 20 employees. So, but for Medicare, that is considered a large group. So someone calls, they have 22 employees over there. What is their advice for A and B?
Right. So again, we always have a discussion on cost and coverage. What is your plan? Do you like your plan? How much do you pay for your plan? And then we talk about, well, what is Medicare going to do? Because that will set up kind of more of an apples to apples comparison on whether you want to elect to stay on your large group employer plan or whether you want to go on to Medicare. Another factor would be, are you carrying a spouse on your plan or a dependent that is not Medicare eligible yet? Because you might not want to go into the individual market. So there's a lot of factors. Or are you going to be retiring soon? What is going on in your situation? But if you really love your plan, let's say cost and coverage wise, your employer plan fits the bill, then generally you would decide then whether to go on to A of original Medicare because it is premium free for most people.
Most people don't have to
B
pay.
does have a cost.
Right.
So some people would elect to go on to A and decline B so that A sits as secondary. So if you go into the hospital, it may pay something after your primary group health insurance plan.
So then do they have to do say they sign up for A, do they have to do something or fill out any paperwork that says, hey, I'm not doing B right now because I'm on my employer plan, or is that just kind of automatically assumed?
Right. So unless you're drawing Social Security, which most people are not whenever you're still working, the government is not going to do anything or expect anything from you. So if you stay off of A and B completely, or you go on to A and decline B at the time, the government's just going to sit and wait until it's time to enroll, or you want to elect to enroll B. That's when the paperwork comes in.
Got you. Because then at that point, they're like, you have to explain to the government why you didn't go on B at your 65th birthday.
Right.
And explain that you've had credible coverage at that
And you
time.
explain it typically by, there's a form that, we would usually send you that has your employer fill out part of it. That's what the key is generally how they see, oh, you've had prior coverage and now you can go on to B because you're going to be losing it.
Right. So now let's look at a smaller plan. Somebody calls, they only have 10 employees, or they're an owner of a company with 3 employees. What is the advice that you would give to someone like that?
Right. So the advice is always you need to follow what Medicare recommends that you do. And so in this situation, if you continue with a small group employer plan, Medicare is actually designed to be primary, and the small group employer plan is going to be secondary. So be very careful if you decide that you don't want to, because remember, Medicare is still not going to say anything. They're not going to tell you warning, warning.
Yeah.
But if you decide not to go on to Medicare, you are potentially going to be in for a rude awakening if your small group employer plan starts to deny claims because they're like, hey, Medicare should be the one paying this.
Yeah.
So my recommendation is always to follow what the government says, and that would be to go on to A and B.
Okay. And at that time, too, they can determine, does it make sense to get on a supplement, to supplement that and then drop their employer plan? Because obviously they don't want to pay for both if they don't have to, right?
Right. So sometimes people think you get a discount if your small group employer plan moves to secondary coverage. Well, no, the insurance company loves it because their liability is a lot less because there's a primary insurance plan. So most of the time you don't want to continue paying those premiums. It's kind of rare for a small group employer to pay 100%. Sometimes it happens. You might want to keep it that way. But typically, you're going to want to drop that small group employer plan, save that premium, and add like a Medicare supplement, something, or a Medicare Advantage plan that really is more designed for when you're in Medicare.
Actually in Medicare.
That's
to
right.
cover everything. Instead of having to work through the two different insurance company, even within the same insurance company, right? Because the Medicare side isn't going to talk to the group side typically.
Yeah,
and
coordination of benefits is
gonna
really,
be
it's like a
hairy.
black box, and whatever comes out of it, is what comes out of it. So with a Medicare supplement, they're designed to work with original Medicare. So in that instance, there's some certainty on how everything's going to be covered.
Great. And so another thing I hear consistently that gets very hairy is the HSA, right?
Yep.
That gets to be kind of a bad word around the Medicare age. So what's that about, and how can people avoid that pitfall?
Right. So In the HSA context, we're really, again, now going to be talking about someone who has a large group employer plan, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're a small group employer, you need to go on to A and B.
Mm-hmm.
But in the instance where you're with a large group employer, some people would like to go on to A, like we talked about, and decline B. But there is a situation in which you're not going to want to go on to A either, and that's if you want to continue contributing to your health savings account. So a health savings account is not an FSA. A health savings account is specifically designed for a high deductible health plan. And it's there where you contribute money into it. You get like a tax deduction and all those things. So the government is sort of incentivizing you to put money aside to pay things with the health savings account. Well, if you go on to A, or B, but if you go on to A, the premium free A, that will not allow you to continue to contribute new money. And so you don't lose the health savings account, but you can't continue to contribute it. And if you do and you get audited, they're going to slap your hand and say these were not allowed. And so something that is very important that people don't realize as well is that Part A, usually it will be retroactive up to 6 months or back to your birthday month. So if someone is not going to retire until 67 and they're like, oh, I love my HSA, I'm just going to continue to contribute all the way up until I'm going on to Medicare. Well, typically you need to stop your HSA contribution 6 months prior to that date because it will go retroactive, and all those contributions that actually were made within that retroactive time period technically were not allowed. So it's a little bit of a pitfall, and a little bit of planning will allow you not to have to go through that.
So you don't have to close your HSA account. You don't need to, take all the money out. You just can't contribute any new money.
Right. You can still pay co-pays and co-insurance and stuff with your HSA when you're on Medicare, but you can't contribute new money and take the tax breaks that come along with an HSA contribution.
Right. So another thing to be aware of, right, is COBRA. We hear that. It's like, okay, if we tell our people, if you hear anybody say COBRA, call us. What are those pitfalls, and how can folks kind of avoid that?
So the main thing to remember about COBRA is that it is not considered active employee insurance. So that means you do not get an extension for when you're allowed to add Part B when it's time, when you're losing employer coverage. COBRA does not extend that. So be very, very careful that you're adding Part B in a timely manner that really is not taking COBRA into account for whether to add Part B or not. You need to add Part B even if you're going to decide to continue COBRA.
Well, we had that instance just the other day where that person, continued to take their COBRA for the full 18 months, right? And then called and said, hey, I'm ready to go on Medicare.
Yeah, he called me and said, I'm ready to add B. And I said, you're not going to be able to add B. You're going to have a delay and a penalty now because you needed to go on to Part B when you were losing your employer plan. Losing COBRA is not the same, and that's where the mistakes happen.
Yeah, it's a big issue.
Now, the thing is, just so you know, so COBRA is not creditable to Part B, but COBRA is creditable mostly for Part D, as in the prescription drug plan.
Confusing
so
enough.
I don't know why this happens this way, but just remember, when it comes to Part B of Medicare, COBRA is not a way to delay that anymore.
All right, so that takes care of COBRA. So for those folks that do work past 65, they took, maybe A because they're in a large group of plan. So what is kind of the enrollment periods now for when they're retiring and getting off of their group plan?
Right. So whenever you're retiring and you're coming off, there is an 8-month window that opens up from when you lose your plan for you to be able to add Part B. Now, why anyone would want to wait within those 8 months, I don't know. Usually we want to start 2 to 3 months before that first month. But you do have an 8-month window that opens up for you to be able to add that Part B. So just be aware that that is important, and you want to work within that 8-month window. And that's what I was talking about. COBRA doesn't extend that window. But that 8-month window allows you to do that. And there's a couple of forms that you need to fill out. We can send that to you, no problem. And then we'll just work with you to get everything set up so that your transition from when that employer plan is terminating and when Medicare picks up as primary, that transition's really smooth. So just be aware that 8-month window is there. Now, if you want an Advantage plan, a Part D drug plan, you actually need to start. That's a 2-month window. The biggest takeaway on these deadlines is call us 2 to 3 months before so that we can help you work through the process. Not only setting up B, but also doing the Medicare supplement or Advantage, the drug plan, just to get everything set up so that it's easy.
Right. So everything lines up and you don't have any gaps in
That's
your
right.
coverage. We also have a vlog on our website I want to mention about Working Past 65 where we go over a lot of this stuff even in more detail. So definitely check that out on go4oaks.com. And a lot of great information on there, including that vlog. All right, so let's go into story time now. Yay! So what story do you have for us today, Jamon?
Okay. I don't know if this is an inspiring story or if it's just like, oh, it's the government. And so I had someone who did everything right. We were going through and getting Part B all set up, and they sent all their forms in, and just delay after delay. And I always say, like, they're going to lose your forms maybe. So always
just prepare that it's going to be lost.
Always follow up. And then finally it was like a week out, and I said, you need to get those forms and you need to go into the Social Security office and just pray that you find someone that with a smile. And she ended up doing that, and it ended up going into effect. But it's just always know that when you're dealing with a governmental office, they will lose things, all that. So it's just important to prepare. And I think part of it was I was there to help her along to just say, hey, here's what you need to do now. So it's always good. I was helping her through that process. And so
even if you go through it all and you do it all perfectly and cross your T's, dot your I's, do it in time, it's still the government. You're still dealing with a government agency, and
the key is follow up. You follow up and make sure, do you have it in the system? I actually say have them log your call. All those things are important as evidence to know that you were trying to get it in place in time. So most of the time it goes smoothly, but you always have to what is called trust but verify.
Yeah, good old Ronald Reagan quote. That should have been our quote for today. But actually, our inspiration today comes from a great, amazing documentary we watched called Beyond Utopia. It's really big on Netflix right now.
Also on PBS, the PBS channel.
Yeah.
But it is an amazing story about a Christian pastor whose mission in life is to help those that are defecting out of North Korea make the treacherous journey. I mean, they're already risking their life just leaving, but they have to go into China, and they're making the treacherous journey through the mountains, the jungles of Vietnam and Laos to get to freedom in Thailand. And so it is amazing and he goes on those journeys to take them out. And so he actually saved his wife, fell in love with his wife when he went to China to just see the conditions of what he was witnessing of these North Koreans that had defected, and fell in love, and that was his calling. So he saved over 1,000 North Koreans, and now that's his life's mission and work. It's called the Caleb Mission. So we would highly recommend that you view it. It's tough. It's tough. Things in North Korea, I mean, it's like the worst of the worst. And so we just can't forget. So pray for the North Koreans, pray for that pastor and the Caleb Mission. I was inspired. Yeah, definitely watch it. It was inspiring. It's really highlighted a family where they had the grandma and then 2 young girls as well going on this, very, very hard journey. And so just really inspiring, and really encourage anybody to watch it. Absolutely. Okay, so finally we're going to finish up here with news and deadlines. What are kind of the latest developments, and what do we need to chat about today? So we're in a little bit of a quiet period right now, just with what's going on with the Inflation Reduction Act phases that are coming for 2025. So we'll have more information on that, but there's going to be a lot of changes. I mean, you just got to be ready. So remember, in September, the annual notice of change is going to come. It's going to hit your mailbox or hit your email. Make sure that you just remember that. because there's going to be a lot of stuff coming. So, but right now, everything's kind of quiet and it's okay.
Yeah, and if you'd like to read more about the Inflation Reduction Act and how that is affecting Medicare, Medicare premiums, Part D premiums, there is a blog also on our website, go4oaks.com, all about the Inflation Reduction Act. And
oh boy.
I know, so exciting. But there's definitely more info coming. I think a lot of the companies are trying to figure out what they're going to do for 2025 at this point. So
they are.
All right, well, that wraps up this great episode. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe. All of those things really mean a lot to us, and we appreciate you, and we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.